Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Auburn Undercover podcast. Doing this one live on the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel. Christian Clemente here, joined by Jason Caldwell. Jason, it's been the theme of June, the busiest month of the year, I would probably call it, at least in terms of recruiting. And it has definitely lived up to that billing for Auburn so far. It has been official visit season, unofficial visit season, camp season, workouts, 7-on-7 camps, all of that. There's been commitments. We've already been back on the Auburn Undercover YouTube channel talking about Donovan Starr and Project Scholl earlier. I guess it was this weekend when that happened. There was a commitment today from a guy who last Tuesday we did not even know really existed, in all honesty. He was not really a name that we were tracking at all. And we're going to talk about all of that, the official visitors that are currently on campus, the official visitors that will be on campus. But Jason, we'll start with the news that has actually happened, where Auburn got a commitment from Bryce. I'm going to go with Bryce Deas. I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. Did not ask him when we talked to him. Should have done that. Did not do that.
I think it's Diaz.
Diaz. Okay.
Yeah, Diaz. Yes, like it would be Diaz, but it's
okay.
But yeah. So I'm pretty sure it's Diaz, and so interesting player. I mean,
yeah,
you got a chance to see him work out in camp, run around. Saw some of the measurables that he put up, Christian, and this is a guy that has put in the work. Came and worked. Matter of fact, he came and worked at camp. They kind of did an individual workout with the coaches, and then he jumped in and went back into the camp that had probably 500 guys out there. Coaches looked out, and he's out there running around. They basically said, "Hey, you've done enough. You're good. Go to the sidelines." And so they had to basically kick him off the field. Those are the types of things that get guys like this an offer, that come quickly, that come off the radar. That maybe are come to surprise. It's those types of things where they go, all right, athleticism matches up, work ethic matches up, coachability matches up. These are the types of guys, and it's rare now because a lot of these guys get offers. He already had offers, and they go, I'm not going to camp somewhere. He wanted an Auburn offer, and he camped, and he got an Auburn offer. And a really, really interesting guy because of the versatility.
Yeah, Jason, I think that might be one of my favorite parts of this whole story is, we saw, well, first off, we're sitting and we're waiting for camp to get rolling, and Blake Woodby walks on past. I'm like, is that Blake Woodby? Yeah. We'd just seen him last weekend. Obviously, they're both their teammates at St. Francis up in Maryland. I'm like, okay, well, this is not a guy from, Central Phoenix City. This isn't a guy that just hopped in the car and drove down here. So he comes back and realizes it is Blake, and he brings Bryce over. He's like, yes, my teammate Bryce. And Bryce told you, he said, hey, if I get an offer, I'm committing today. And sometimes guys will say that and not necessarily follow through, or, they'll kind of be half joking. And that was kind of how I led off my commitment story with Bryce was, he was half joking about it, but he was serious in the end. This was an opportunity that he really wanted. So you mentioned the versatility and all that stuff and the coachability. There's also the factor of, wanting to be at Auburn, wanting to contribute and play, wherever that may be as a linebacker, money backer, safety. You mentioned it that he's even, he's played running back for St. Francis as well. He can really do a whole lot.
Yeah, and was 6'1.5", 210, ran low 4.5s, had like a 37 vertical. I mean, this is a tremendous athlete, good change of direction. He gives you a lot of things. I think the first thing he gives you is a guy that probably steps on the field right away and plays on special teams. And those guys are really valuable for a coaching staff. So I think that's the first thing he does. And then you try to figure out where he fits. I ain't going to be on defense, but he plays slot receiver. He plays running back. He does some things. I think he'll end up fitting on defense. Where that is, who knows? I mean, heck, I tell you, he rushed the passer pretty well. And Jalen McLeod was probably smaller than this coming out of high school, to be quite honest, and has turned into that guy. Heck, he might be that guy down the road. What he is a guy that has a lot of burst, a lot of athleticism, and pretty physical. And so take guys like that and figure out where they wind up later on. But really interesting player. And it, kind of reminds me a little bit of a Will Muschamp guy when he was a defensive coordinator, when he was a head coach. because he would do that from time to time. He would take a player that was kind of off the radar a little bit. Kevin Steele did some of that too. They like to see guys and see them in action, watch them. And you think about this staff now with the older guys, especially on defense. When you think about Charles Kelly, a veteran guy, Weston McGriff, veteran guy, DJ Durkin's a veteran guy, and then King kind of fits in there with it. There's nothing better than working out a guy on your own and seeing what he can do, and kind of coachability. All those things come into play, and this reminds me of one of those guys. And a lot of times those guys turn out to be really good players, and he's going to have a chance.
Yeah, appreciate everyone that's here in the chat asking questions. We will get to those probably towards the end of the show once we go through some of the things. I will snag this question here from Clayton real quick, though. With the commitment of Bryce, do y'all think Blake could move his commitment timeline up to the next couple of weeks or so instead of waiting? He had said previously kind of middle of the season. Look, both of these guys are going to be back for Big Cat Weekend. I think Blake could be committed to Auburn before then. I think he could commit at Big Cat. I think maybe he could wait a little bit after that, but I don't think he would wait too much longer than that. I think Auburn has positioned itself pretty well there to get his commitment here within the next couple months, I would say is fair. But Auburn's definitely in a good spot. With that, Jason, let's touch on the official visitors that were on campus this past weekend. There were a lot of them, a lot of really good ones for that matter. Let's go Antonio Coleman, the former Alabama commit, former Auburn commit, current Alabama commit, to catch you up on the way things have gone down there. It's been a bit of a roller coaster recruitment. All of that capped off by visited Auburn 2 weeks after he flipped back to Alabama from Auburn, and then was back this weekend for his official visit in Auburn. Said 9 times out of 10, I'm going to be at Big Cat Weekend. Said that he'd be at a lot of games this fall, and it's one that Auburn has kind of told him, look, we are going to pursue you until the absolute end. And I think if there is movement here, it would be at the end in terms of Auburn getting him back. I think that's a very real possibility, but I don't think anything would happen within the near future.
Yeah, this one feels like one where Auburn goes, hey, we want you, but look, take your time with it. We're going to be there. We're going to take you. There's no need to rush this thing again and go back and forth. Hey, and so I think it's, hey, take your time, make sure that's exactly what it is, because this one feels like there's one more opportunity. Hey, one more time, and if it don't work again, that's probably going to be it. So I think it's, hey, take your time. No question that this is a guy that's really high on Auburn's board. We both love his game, and I think you look at him, and he is a guy that is a competitor, can play, and is a difference maker in the middle of a defense. And so with the guys they already have, would be a huge one if Auburn could get him here down the stretch.
Yeah, we'll stick with Alabama commitments, and we'll go with Derrick Smith, who is back on campus. Maybe one of the most versatile athletes in the country. Alabama has him committed to play safety, although apparently Alabama has opened that up and said, hey, you could play receiver too if you wanted. Seems like kind of a recruiting pitch there to make sure that things are opened up. Wherever Auburn has, he could be a safety for Auburn, but Auburn has pretty much locked him in on the wide receiver board and had him there for a long time as a guy who, Jason, we've seen him play at Southside Selma. He will need some coaching wherever he ends up. He will need to develop a little bit. But in terms of traits, raw athleticism, it doesn't get too much better than Derrick Smith in the 2025 class. And Auburn seemingly made a pretty big move this weekend. He said that he'll continue to visit and be back. He doesn't really want to have a final decision until signing day. And a big reason for that, I asked him, I said, is there something that Auburn can do to get up above Alabama? And he said, yes, I want to see them play this fall, and I want to see the product on the field.
And I think that's probably the separator. If Auburn comes out and you see Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson, these guys, and they're making plays, and whether it's Derrick Smith or Caleb Cunningham, I think that's maybe the separator for a couple of those guys on the next group of wide receivers. Go, hey, okay, want to see that, show up. And so I think that's going to be a big part of it. Big part of it will be who the quarterback is. If you get a quarterback in this class and they go, oh, okay, that's the guy. We're set for the next few years. And Walker White could be that guy. He may already be on campus, but a lot of times it happens in their particular class. If they go, oh, that's my guy, and they come in with them. So that could have an impact on a guy like Derrick Smith. But yeah, athletically, as good as it gets. I mean, he's a Malcolm Simmons type athlete from last year. Different kind of style, because he's probably plays a little bit more closer to the line of scrimmage on defense. As a young guy, he played kind of traditional safety spot. I think he had 13 interceptions as a freshman, some kind of crazy number. But he's put up massive wide receiver and receiving numbers in his career. But just upside is what I think about for him. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Courtney Taylor. You're coming from a school where you had to play both ways. You play football, you play basketball, you play all these different sports, and you haven't had a chance to really hone in on being a wide receiver. I think when he does that, it may take him a little bit of time, but I think he's got a whole lot of upside.
Bouncing back to the defensive line here, Nate Marshall, the Illinois native who is committed to Michigan. Auburn, he laid it out plain and simple. He said it's Auburn or Michigan for me. Miami and Alabama have been in the mix, but he said they're not really in it anymore. He said it's Auburn or Michigan. It's really close. And Jason, I think the biggest takeaway or the biggest future note for Nate Marshall is he said that he was going to try and make it back for Big Cat Weekend, which is on July 27th. Michigan does some sort of barbecue or cookout event on that day as well. That's one of their, they don't really do like Georgia does its big event in May. Clemson does its big event the first weekend of June or the last weekend of May. Michigan does its about the exact same time as Auburn there at the end of July. So if Nate Marshall, who's committed to Michigan, ends up at Auburn for Big Cat Weekend, it's not a guarantee that he signs with Auburn or that he flips to Auburn, but wherever he is that weekend, there's a decent chance that's the school that he ends up with, in my mind.
Yeah, the fact that Auburn makes this one interesting with a kid from Illinois that's committed to Michigan tells you all you need to know about the job that this staff has done in recruiting. Vontrell King Williams has obviously been recruiting this guy for a while. Has got kind of that bond, but I mean, this is a Midwestern guy committed to the defending national champs, and Auburn has made an impact and has absolutely put itself in position here. I think that's impressive when you think about it. This is a guy that in the 24/7 composite is a top 50 player in the country, and so you look at him and he doesn't have that big physical body yet, which I think is really interesting because I think he
reminds me of. I was just going to cut in real quick. He reminds me of Amaris Williams, a little bit of a guy who could be a really good D end.
Yep. Depends on, does he get to 285, 290 and play 3 technique, or does he stay at 260 and be a pass rusher with a bigger body? He gives you some of that versatility too.
Yeah. So he's an interesting one. That's one. I had him actually in my first mock class that I put out a couple months ago, which I will have a second mock class once the official visits wrap up. So you can stay tuned over at auburnundercover.com for that. Speaking of that real quick, you can actually still join us Tuesday, the 11th, if you are watching live. Tonight is the last night to go over and join us at 60% off an annual sale. After that, it goes back down to, I think, 30%. So there is still a discount, but not nearly what you would get with 60%. And look, there's a huge weekend of official visits coming up. And for that matter, there's a lot of official visitors currently on campus. So it's a good opportunity to take advantage of that sale. Jason, another big visitor, literally big visitor that was on campus this past weekend, Jacobe Ward, the interior offensive lineman from Benedictine Military School over in Georgia, the former home of Holden Gerner. He is teammates with Herbert Third Scroggins, the big Auburn Buck linebacker target. I think Auburn would absolutely love to get both of those guys. I feel pretty confident that Auburn gets both of those guys. I definitely feel confident that Auburn gets Jacobe Ward after this past weekend, where he said that Auburn is still the leader. They would be hard to beat, even though he's still going to go see Tennessee and LSU over the next couple of weeks. And he plans to commit on July 4th. I definitely think there will be some fireworks there in Jake Thornton's office on the holiday in less than a month.
Yeah, this is a guy that you watch, and he kind of reminds me of the guys that kind of Auburn built around on the offensive line a decade ago. When you think about Mike Berry and Byron Isom and some of those guys, guys that could probably have played tackle in maybe a different kind of system, but are road grader type guards. That's who he's a road grader and fun to watch. He's really aggressive. And the thing I think is you look at him and he's almost 350 pounds, but he's got really good feet. He's got quick feet to be a big guy. And you think about, you get to the next level and get to the training table, strength and conditioning program, and think about what happens when you get to 335 instead of 350 and how much different. I mean, I think he's a guy that with a ton of potential and could be an early kind of contributor on offensive line, and that didn't used to happen. It's happening more now, and I think he could be one of those guys that has that type of impact.
Yeah, because we have so much to talk about, we're not going to talk about the 2 Auburn commits that were on campus this past weekend, Bryce Deas and Tyler Lockhart, although both were very interesting to talk to, had a lot of good things to say. You can read those stories over at auburnundercover.com. Jason, you got a chance to talk with Christian Jones, and I didn't really catch any of that interview. I don't know a whole lot about what's happening here, but seems like the visit overall went pretty well for the Nebraska linebacker.
It did. First time to Auburn for him and his dad. First trip to Alabama, period. Loved the weather, loved the food. That was the starting point for them. And that's pretty good starting points to be at. But again, it's DJ Durkin. Whether we've heard it from 3 or 4 different guys going, hey, that's my connection. And this is a guy that Durkin recruited when he was at Texas A&M. He was scheduled to go to USC on an official visit, changed his mind and came to Auburn. And he said, hey, we'll be back. And so I think Auburn will get another visit from him. Still got Nebraska. He's still got a couple of schools there. Obviously, in-state, home state kid, that's going to be a tough one when you're talking about Nebraska football and trying to get a guy like that out of the state. But I think when you think about now SEC and think about playing and all the things that came through on the visit, and getting back in on campus, whether it be Big Cat or for a game, then I think you amp up Auburn's opportunities and chances for big time physical, athletic kid. And it's one that you can now at least pencil in on your radars and going, okay, Auburn's got a shot here.
Yeah, the other interesting thing there is too, look, you have a lot of linebacker options. I mean, you've got Tyler Lockhart committed. JJ Falk is kind of a hybrid guy. Think he probably transitions to Buck linebacker at some point. You've got Jaden Perlotti, who will be in this week. He should get in on Wednesday. You've got Daryl Duke Johnson, the Alabama commit, who will be in this upcoming weekend. You just had Elijah Melendez in. Bryce Deas, who just committed, could end up being a linebacker. Still think in the long run, Eric Winters could maybe grow into a linebacker as well. So you've got a lot of names there. So it'll be interesting. Jason, the last guy that we're going to talk about from this past weekend, another guy I didn't really get a chance to catch up with. Seems to have gone well for Travis Smith. I don't think it'll be enough to knock off Georgia, just because I think they've invested so much time and have elevated him maybe a little bit more on the board than Auburn has. But look, he's a great kid, and it's always fun to catch up with him for sure.
It is a great kid. Georgia's adding some players at positions where Auburn is recruiting against them, and Georgia adds a wide receiver on Tuesday night. Don't think it'll impact him. He's a guy that's way up there. But I think you look at it and you look at the 2 in-state wide receivers from Georgia, and you go, okay, can you get one of those 2 guys? I think you give yourself a chance to get one of those 2 guys if you're Auburn. And Travis Smith feels so much like Auburn. He talked about certain things and certain things that he enjoyed, and whether it was the faith aspect, the family aspect of it. He is a fun-loving, not shy kind of guy. And I think the competition is one thing that he would really enjoy. He talked about, hey, hanging out with players and, talking to the wide receivers and doing those things. Again, I probably kind of lean towards you. I still think he probably winds up at Georgia. But this is another one that I think you get back and, even though he's going to make a decision, scheduled to make a decision later this summer, throw the football and you light it up and you start to show those things on offense, and it could have an impact on a guy like this.
Yeah, so that wraps up the guys that were on campus this past weekend. 8 were in total. Obviously, the 6 that we talked about, plus Auburn's 2 commitments. And then the staff quickly turned around and brought in 6 more. They arrived on Monday. One of them got in on Sunday and is out of Auburn already, actually, and Shakai Mills-Knight. And we will have an update on him on Wednesday morning. But got a chance to talk with him, the huge running back out of the Baylor school. Jason, you were kind of talking with him, and he's a guy he's listed at 6'1", 217. I think he's closer to 6'2", and probably about 217 or 220, somewhere in there. He is definitely a very unique back on on what could be Auburn's roster and also on Auburn's recruiting board. They don't make a lot of running backs like him anymore.
No, and Auburn hasn't had a guy like this in quite a while, to be quite honest. And that's the intriguing part of it is that he is really the big back that they're recruiting, and they've been looking for a guy to complement the other guys on this roster, and so kid originally from Canada, that comes down and kind of checks out Auburn. I think he'll be back and to see things again, but I think Auburn's there. How much can they make up? Can they get into the mix again? I think they got to have a shot. It was hard to get a read because he didn't really say a lot, pretty quiet, and obviously a kid that's just kind of gotten thrown into the recruiting process. So he hasn't had a chance for 2 years to talk since he was a freshman in high school. So a little bit more under wraps for him, but I think Auburn made an impact, and I think they're going to have a shot there. I think it probably for him, he said, he talked to Derrick Nix and said, look, how to be using the offense, some of those things. Again, he may want to see what this offense looks like and kind of those opportunities for running backs. But I do think opportunity, when you think about, he said, hey, have 2 senior running backs, what the running back room looks like moving forward. Obviously, Jarquez Hunter's there, but Damari Alston's now an older guy. There's absolutely going to be opportunities in that Auburn running back room moving forward.
Yeah, it'll kind of come down to, at least in my opinion, where does he stack up on the board? I mean, there's questions in the chat about Usman Kroma. Again, y'all keep throwing your questions in the chat. We will get to those eventually. But there's Usman Kroma. There's Alvin Henderson, obviously. Yep. DeJuan Morris, the USC commit, is supposed to be in this weekend. Kylan Deer is still out there. I think that's a guy that Auburn will get in for an official visit. So there's a lot of running backs out there on the board. And I think Shakai Mills-Knight is one of those tier 1 guys as Auburn searches for probably a tier 1 and a tier 2, maybe 2 tier 1s, depending on how the NIL works out and other things like that. But it'll be interesting to see with him. And then Jason, the other one who is also going to depart early on Wednesday, Caleb Edwards, a guy that we got to see in San Antonio at the National Combine out there.
Yep.
That feels, that was in January, and that feels like 4 years ago based on how this month is going. But got to see him, and he'll be departing early Wednesday. I got a chance to catch up with him, and he said Auburn's basically top 3. He has a large list of schools, some on the West Coast. He's a California from tight end. He's a tight end from California.
You had it all there, just in different order.
Yes, but he's got some schools out there on the West Coast: Oregon, Washington, UCLA. But he said for him right now, the main 3 are Texas, Alabama, and Auburn. And he just came from Texas, in Auburn now, and then he's headed to Alabama next week. So it's a interesting kind of collection of schools there, trying to get one of the top tight ends in the country out of California. And Ben Angamoa is a guy who has proven that. Last year with DeAndre Carter, he was pretty big in that recruitment, and he's trying to get it again with Caleb Edwards.
Yeah, tremendously athletic, long tight end. This is a true receiving tight end. This is the guy that stretches the field, that makes plays in the passing game, that does all those things. And you look at him, and he's got everything you're looking for. He looks like one of those guys that you go, hey, that guy's getting ready to enter his junior year of college and get ready for the NFL draft. That's what he looks like physically. So he would be top. I don't know what number it would be, but if you get this guy, to me, it would be top 4 or 5 guys in a class kind of guy, because of the way Auburn wants to use its tight ends, because of the ability he's got. I think he's that type of difference maker if Auburn could get him.
Yeah, so he is another one that's currently on campus, leaving Wednesday. The other guys that are on campus that will leave Wednesday: Isaiah Gibson, the 5-star edge rusher from Warner Robins, committed to USC. Zion Grady, the edge rusher out of Enterprise, who is honestly kind of growing into more of a defensive end as things continue to move on. Javion Campbell, a guy out of Kentucky who is massive at 6'5", 265, listed as an edge, more of a defensive lineman for sure now. And I don't really know too much about him, so it'll be interesting to catch up with him. And the same goes for Walter Mathis, a big kind of nose tackle out of Cavalry Day School there in Georgia. So it'll be good to catch up with him as well. And we will have all those updates for you at auburnundercover.com on Wednesday. Also on Wednesday, as I mentioned, Jaden Perlotti will get in. He'll be on campus until Friday. That's a guy that we have talked about on this show quite a bit. Auburn has been there, been really close a couple times. He's stuck with Georgia each time. And DJ Durkin coming on has kind of helped Auburn even more there. So we'll see kind of where things go from there. And then Jason, there is one more weekend available for visits after this, but Auburn is closing up shop for the most part this weekend. They're wrapping things up, and they're wrapping it up in a big way. About a dozen or so guys are expected on campus. Some of the headliners, I will not read off all of the guys. You can go get that at auburnundercover.com. The headliner, of course, is Juju Lewis, who everyone is asking about in the chat, and we'll get to those questions. Daryl Duke Johnson, the Alabama commitment from Georgia. Eric Winters, a guy that people know plenty about, and Shamar Arnaud is another guy that's not committed as well. Half the guys that are coming in are Auburn commits, to be honest. So not a bad strategy to get your commits in while Juju Lewis, one of your biggest targets, and some of those other guys are on campus as well. Some extra recruiters, if you will, a little bit. So it'll be a crazy weekend to wrap things up. It will be, sure.
And those are top of the board type guys. When you think about, obviously Juju's a guy that I think this is going to be a massive weekend, and I'm sure that there's plenty of questions about him. But Eric Winters is a guy that Auburn has recruited a long time. He is absolutely a priority for Charles Kelly at that safety spot. And think about kind of a group of guys there. We've had stories on really those guys. When you think about new boy Hanquan Fagans from Thompson that he was in, and now you think about Eric Winters, those two guys at the safety spots. That's going to be huge. Shamar Arnaud was honestly about as impressive as anybody in the 707s that we saw at cornerback from Carrollton, teammates of Juju. He is a guy that has flown up Auburn's board, so be interesting to see what happens there. Obviously, the question, if you land Fagans and Winters, do you think they shut the safety market down? Might try to get a third guy.
I think you would.
Depending on who it is, it would probably be more of a hybrid type guy that could be a nickel, maybe slide to safety, do some of those things. That, don't you think, probably more of a tweener kind of guy?
Yeah, I think he would still keep trying for a guy like Martellus Carter, who's committed to Kentucky because Auburn likes him so much. But it's not like you would break the bank or invest all your time and resources into him, but you would definitely still continue recruiting him. And then the second part of that question, how many corners is Auburn taking? So let's see, you've already got, what do you have? You have 3 committed because you have Devin Williams, Donovan Starr, Dante Core. They would definitely take name offered as a take no matter what, whenever.
Yeah.
Blake Woodby, I think you would still take. And I think Shamar Arnaud is a guy you would still take.
I think you'd probably get to 5 at some point, because I don't know that you'd get the 6th one out of that group. So you probably a couple more you were probably able to get if you could get those guys. And that's probably a position, along with offensive line now, you probably need, in wide receiver, you probably need as much depth at those spots as you do anywhere on the field. And corner is one of those, because Woodby's a guy that could eventually be a nickel kind of guy. He's kind of has that build. I could see him kind of fitting in that role. So you have really 3 spots to fill at that corner.
We'll touch on this one real quick from Efficient Gaming. With Diaz committing, does that mean that Auburn has a good shot at Blake Woodby? Touched on that a little bit earlier. Yes, absolutely. Think Auburn is clearly the team to beat there. I will group some of these questions together because they're all kind of the same. From Kyle, other than Juju Lewis, who are the QBs Auburn is pursuing? There was one more from here. Blake, that's who it was. Is Auburn quietly still talking to KJ Lacy? I'm not so sure Juju is truly that interested. I do think Juju Lewis is definitely interested. And there was another question I wanted to. There it is from Michael. What's the timeline with Juju Lewis? I think we can group all of those together. So Juju Lewis obviously will be on campus this weekend. That has been Auburn's kind of top guy there at quarterback. In terms of other guys, KJ Lacy is obviously the second one. To answer Blake's question, yes, they're absolutely still talking to him. Kind of keeping him warm, keeping him on the back burner there a little bit, making sure that he's still interested, and Auburn making sure that he knows that they are still interested as well. In terms of timeline with Juju Lewis, I think things will be.
I think it's coming to a head.
Yeah, I think things will ramp up quickly this weekend. I think Auburn will try to make its move. Obviously, they would love to get him to flip this weekend, but I don't know if that's a realistic possibility. But I think there could be not an ultimatum. That's not the right word here, but it would be a look. We need to know by this day, because at that point we need to pivot to KJ Lacy.
Correct. And yeah, I agree. I think you got to know something soon enough to go, hey, whatever resources or everything we're doing here, it needs to go here or here. And because it's different than corner. I mean, you need a few of those guys. There's also a bunch of them out there that, there's not a bunch of those guys at quarterback that you feel like, oh, these are guys that can lead us to where we want to get to. KJ Lacy is definitely one of those guys. But it's hard to recruit two of them at the same time. But I think he is absolutely still a guy.
Yeah. And the other thing is, quarterback always just naturally becomes the leader of the class. So you want to get that. You want to get your leader of the class. You want to get your guy going. You want to help having that guy for a guy like, Travis Smith, who we talked about, for a guy like a Derrick Smith, for a guy like a Caleb Cunningham. You want to get that guy. So you want to get that ramped up here soon. And I think we'll learn a lot this weekend based on how things are going. We will grab some more questions here in the chat. If I can find some, you'll keep dropping questions in the chat. We'll answer some more here for another 10 or 15 minutes or so probably, and then close it off. Questions about Usman Chroma. People talking about one, Josh was asking about, has he set a date for his commitment or a timeline? No. Talked with him last Thursday when he was at the 7-on-7 camp with his team. He doesn't really have a decision timeline in terms of when he wants to wrap things up. He thought it could go into the fall or late summer. But Auburn has definitely continued to make a move there. A lot of that is how much they've prioritized him there on the running back board. And the same thing goes for, just the plan that they have for him. Florida State involved as well, Georgia involved. But look, Usman is a guy that we've gotten to know pretty well, really nice kid. And he opened up a lot when I was interviewing him last Thursday. He said, look, I'm Muslim and they have a mosque near the campus. They have a nutrition plan for me specifically. When he would be fasting and things like that. So Auburn has gone the extra mile there a little bit to make sure that they have a plan in place for him that he would be comfortable with, his family would be comfortable with. And I think Auburn is definitely, look, he's one of those top running back targets. And I think they sit in a pretty good spot with him.
And I think after seeing him in person, you understand why. He's big and he's physical, but he's got great hands. He catches the ball really well. He does all those things that you look for. And just an outstanding kid. You mentioned it. I mean, he was fun to be around, just talking to him and the thank yous, everything involved. So, I think you look and there's a clear, it looks like group of running backs. And if you're Auburn, it'd be great to get two of them. And that's what they're going to try to do. But I think that you look at it and he's one of those guys in that group for sure.
Here's two good questions from Michael in the chat. What's up with Jordan Crawford taking an official visit to LSU this weekend? And also JJ Falk taking a visit to Florida, who will also go and see Alabama at the end of this month as well. In terms of Jordan Crawford, look, he's super quiet, doesn't say a whole lot, but I think I don't want to say exploring other options, but he's making sure that he makes the right decision and, enjoying the process along the way. Look, for any visit that Jordan Crawford takes, he's probably at Auburn 3 more times to follow that up. He was just on campus. He just decided to come down with his team on Thursday. He decided, he's a guy who doesn't need to work out, but did go through a workout with Vontrell Kane-Williams. I mentioned it on the War Eagle Wake Up that we recorded a couple days ago. We found out he actually almost broke the sled during that workout. That's how powerful he is. And then in terms of JJ Falk, I think it's the same thing. Both of those guys are guys that you have to keep monitoring for us and for Auburn fans, because they obviously are taking other visits. But in terms of guys being solidly committed, they would be up near the top of my list in terms of Auburn's commitment list, where you never say never, but I would be surprised if it did happen. I would say.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is that these aren't it's different when you think about it. Say, hey, you're 38 years old and you've gone to road games at LSU and watched Auburn play at Florida, things like that. But these guys, this is the only opportunity they've had. They might have taken some unofficial visits, but have a chance to take an official visit, see some places, do those things. It's it used to be once in a lifetime experience. Not quite as once in a lifetime experience anymore, but it still is, because even if you transfer later, it's not like this.
It's speed dating.
Very different. It's a very different type of thing. And so, I'm with you. Jordan Crawford has been there. He's been early. He's still there. And then J.J. Falk, McKeldrick Falk's on campus. He's happy. He's a leader of this defense. I'd be absolutely floored if he went anywhere else other than Auburn.
Another one we'll get from Michael here real quick. Will Justice Terry be visiting Auburn for Big Cat? Not that I know of. Auburn has not really been mentioned whatsoever for the 5-star defensive lineman from Georgia who was committed to Georgia, now committed to USC. Although I think he probably will end up back again with Georgia, to be honest. So if I guess he could show up for Big Cat, but that's not something. I haven't heard his name in months, so that would be a surprise. Here's a statement from Dylan. They should tell Juju how much of that NIL money the state of California will take from him come tax season. I mean, in all honesty, though, and people are talking about the travel as well, those are factors. A kid from Carrollton, Georgia, does his family want to go out all the way out to LA to go and watch him play? Taxes, all the stuff like that plays a factor in a decision.
Yeah, and something, when I talked to him on Thursday, he said, hey, 17 years old, away from home. And, that's the other part of this. I mean, he's an early grad. So he is actually just going to be a junior in high school. So technically when he gets to January, he can still be 17 years old and living in Los Angeles. That's a different world than Carrollton, Georgia. And it may be exactly what he's looking for. And if it is, hey, then have at it. But it's going to be a difficult and new experience. And so those are things that factor in. There's no question about it. Does it factor in less now than it did 30 years ago? Probably, but it's still a factor. When you start talking about, hey, you're making money and doing all these things, okay, but you're still talking about, I don't know, a couple $1,000s a weekend to travel across the country and do those things, and the time spent versus, a little over an hour drive if it were to be to Auburn. So I think those are things that could absolutely have a factor in this one moving forward, and not just for Juju, but with other guys.
We'll touch on 2 more questions here real quick. One from Efficient. Antonio Coleman, what are Auburn's chances of flipping him back? Yes, we did touch on this already, but real quick synopsis. Think that Auburn has a very real chance there. If something were to happen quickly, that would be kind of that's the last time something happens. Auburn would basically tell him, hey, shut things down. You're kind of done. But more realistically, I think if Auburn were to flip him, emphasis on the if there, I think it would come closer to signing day, which he even mentioned that he wants to shut down his recruitment probably right before his high school playoffs, which would be right around signing day a couple weeks before then. So that would kind of match up with that timeline if things go there. And then a question from Ant. Could 25 be the best class ever for Auburn? I do think it is possible. And the reason I say that is because I think that I think they're in a spot where they could take more than 25 guys in this class. So if you strictly talk numbers and how many points you could accumulate, if you take 30 guys in a recruiting class, you could probably get your highest point total because you have 5 more guys. I mean, right now you're at like 80 scholarships anyway. So you have 5 spots, and then you would have a good amount of seniors that are gone after this year as well. So, and then just in terms of, actually talking, could it be the best class ever for Auburn? It's tough to say that now in June. If you get a guy like a Julian Lewis, you definitely have potential to do that because of what he brings with him in terms of other guys and guys that would want to join. So it'd be interesting to see, but I like the class that they're building, Jason. I really like it for sure. Offensive line wise, really, really good. Jake Thornton has totally overhauled that room. The defensive line class, you've already got 2 good ones, trying to get a couple more that we talked about earlier. I mean, the whole defensive side of the ball, you've got some really good options there. So best class ever, hard to call in June, but you can definitely say for sure that Auburn is recruiting this 25 class really well, especially the state of Alabama and, kind of the surrounding area as well.
Yeah. And, you look at it and you go, there's obviously from a recruiting number standpoint, there's different ways to think about a class. 1984 is always going to be the benchmark Auburn class. And it's going to be a hard one to beat. I mean, that was Tracy Rocker, Ron Stallworth, Nate Hill, Jim Thompson on offensive line, Freddie Weigand was in that. Rodney Garner was on there. But you had, Duke Donaldson, Stacy Dunn, Smokey Hodge, Vincent Jones, Kevin Porter, Walter Reeves, Brian Smith, Curtis Stewart, Reggie Ware. I mean, like that's a class that had, I don't know, 16, 17 starters, maybe a few more that come out of that. And a lot of them were all SEC guys. That's always going to be the benchmark class for me. But there was, the numbers weren't involved. You had parade All-Americans and you had a few of those guys, but you didn't have 5-star, 4-star guys. So in this era, I think you got a shot to have the best ranked and highest ranked Auburn class. But it's probably going to have Juju Smith-Lewis to get there. You're probably going to have that type of 5-star quarterback, a couple of those guys to be part of that kind of discussion in the end.
Yeah. So Jason, unless I'm missing anything, there are definitely more things that I could talk about in terms of camp and visits. We could go more in depth, but we are already at 40 minutes. There is a lot. And look, it all continues on Wednesday with more official visitors leaving, one more coming in, and then this weekend. So I think we'll probably wrap it up there, Jason, unless there's anything that we need to talk about.
I don't think so. I think it's obviously another, I won't say another big weekend, but this is a week where you go from Sunday to Sunday, and what do you figure it's going to be about 25 or 26 official visitors in a 7 or 8 day window for this staff. And a lot of them are really important players. Obviously, Juju Lewis is one of those guys, but there's some other really good players that'll still be on campus. So keep it locked in. And you mentioned it earlier, but 60% off ends tonight. That's a great deal, and it's a great time to do it because this is a busy, not only next week, but even in the month of July, it'll be a little bit dead in terms of visits, but it won't be dead in terms of recruiting. There'll be lots of decisions made and lots of players making decisions. So come check us out.
Yeah, July is commitment month, and same goes for the end of June. I mean, there's camp guys. I'm just now thinking about Hezekiah Harris, who said he'd commit by the end of June. So there's
26 is going to start in a hurry here soon.
Yeah, so we've got all that covered at auburnundercover.com. One more question from the chat from Grizzly Adams, a subscriber over to Auburn Undercover. Christian, over under 91 at Tobacco Road. I will be taking a golf trip to North Carolina at the end of this month. If you put 191, maybe I could get the under. 91, I will absolutely take the over because the mental block that I have for that course and those sand traps already is just rough. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and we were talking about that, the greens and everything, and looking at Pinehurst and the U.S. Open this week, and seeing the destruction that could be ahead with high temperatures and no rain, and it could be fun, but not fun when you're playing it. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, should be a fun U.S. Open week. Shout out everyone that was here. Michael asking some great questions, and also plugging the website as well. Blake in here as well. Appreciate you guys. Look, there were a ton of y'all that were in here. Really appreciate it. Super impromptu. We decided kind of 7:30. Hey, let's do something at 8 o'clock. Let's go live. So appreciate everyone that came in here. Appreciate everyone that's listening later on as well. We will be back probably Monday, I would say, is a fair day where we will record Monday night after all the official visitors leave. And then have something for you guys next Tuesday morning. Maybe we'll go live as well. Michael, definitely really appreciate you. He said, been a member for over 10 years, so a longtime member of auburnundercover.com. Check us out there for 60% off, and we will see you guys again here soon in about a week or so.